Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy.
So our win is 2005. Our where is Ohio. Our piece of shit of the week is China Arnold. She was born March 29th, 1980. She was convicted of abduction in 2000. I tried to find more on that. It was a bit of a struggle, so I gave up. In 2002, she was convicted of forgery. That's her background.
What's she forging?
China.
Checks?
I don't know.
School
I would assume.
notes?
Guilty. I done did that.
Although technically would write them for, never mind.
So I used to sign Dad's name to get out of school, but I wasn't
supposed
skipping
to confess to the shit.
Yeah, I wasn't skipping any classes. I was a teacher's aide because when I totaled my car in the beginning of the year, I had to ride the bus home. So they had to give me something to do, but because I had no more classes I needed to take, I was just a teacher's aide, and then I was an office aide, and then I was another teacher's aide. So for out of 5 of my classes, 3 of them, I was an aide for other people. So I would forge Dad's signature once I got another vehicle, and I would go to work. So I would only miss out on my teacher's aide stuff, which they said I was too distracting in the classroom and would kick me out, and I would just go wander the halls with a friend of mine. But anyway,
still forging.
I know it.
Not okay.
I said guilty.
I'm guilty. Confessed to a crime.
Is it a crime?
Forging? Yes. You just read someone was arrested for it.
But it's not anything official.
Literally forgery. It's official. It was an official note excusing your absence. It was official.
Okay, well, if the courts want to come down arrest me for something I did more than a decade ago, actually, I guess now it's been 2 decades. Sure. Here I am. Come and get me. Anyway.
I don't know what the statute of limitations for forgery is.
I don't know, but I was reading a case the other day that a woman it was confirmed through the genealogical testing, like one of those family website things, that her mom that raised her was not actually her mother. And it turned out she had been kidnapped when she was 22 months old. She was only living 10 minutes away from where her biological parents were. She was 51 when they finally realized who her real family was. But the statute of limitations on the kidnapping were over, like it was up, so nobody could be charged with her kidnapping, which I think that's absolutely bonkers. But anyway.
Bonkers. Kind of got sidetracked because at first I was like, this.
No, it was a different one. So that's a little backstory on China, the abduction and the forgery. And then she's got her boyfriend, and together there's 4 children. I don't know whose children they are. I don't think they're biological parents to all 4.
They
I'm not sure. Them. She's 31. I'm not sure how old her boyfriend is, but he is an admitted entrepreneur. He sells drugs to make his living, not of the legal variety. And his name is Terrell Talley. So on August 30th, 2005, China and Terrell show up at Children's Medical Center at about 7:15 in the morning with their 28-day-old daughter, Paris Talley. I don't know if I should have done a trigger for this one, but the baby dies. Spoiler, if it's going to make you sick, you might want to turn this off.
Do they eat it?
The little baby girl, Paris, had a temperature of 95 degrees when they showed up at the hospital. She had no pulse, no breath, no blood pressure. During the attempts to revive Paris, China and Terrell were in the room with their daughter and the hospital staff. It was noted that Terrell was visibly upset. He was sobbing while the hospital staff worked on his tiny little girl, and China was yelling at the doctors and nurses. 28 days, so just under a month old.
Just under a month old. I know 28 days.
I don't want you to be
confused. She's a month old.
She's a tiny little baby, okay? And the hospital staff was baffled. Baby Paris had visible burns on her face and limbs, but they weren't like scalding or hot liquid burns. So the staff was like, I don't understand what's going on. And China meanwhile, is screaming at the hospital staff saying, "My baby was not burned," that her skin was just peeling off, which made me
Wow.
literally sit here and blink and stare at the screen for half a beat because
What?
her baby isn't a snake. They don't shed their fucking skin. If her skin is peeling off, that is a problem.
Right. I
But,
feel like no matter your age, if your skin's peeling off, it's a huge problem. It's
right?
supposed to stay where it is.
Sure is. The hospital tried to resuscitate Paris for about 15 minutes before this precious little life was pronounced dead. The hospital was perplexed because Paris was in a clean nightgown, but based on her injuries, her clothing should have contained seepage and chunks of flesh.
That's disgusting.
I know, it's so sad.
I feel bad
Long
for the
story short,
hospital staff
having to
because
see that,
having to work on something so teeny tiny.
it makes me sick. Like this case literally made me sick to do. But long story short, or should I say stories, when asked what happened, China and Terrell could not keep their stories straight. So, version one was told at the hospital. China said she came home around 2 a.m. and tried to feed Paris, but Paris was warm to the touch and she would not drink her bottle. China said she put Paris in her bassinet and turned the fan on and pointed it at the baby. When China got up in the morning, Paris supposedly was not acting right, so she brought the baby to the hospital after putting the other children on the bus for school and giving Terrell calling Terrell on the phone. I don't know. That story sounds fishy to me, but I was already suspicious because there's a dead baby. Version 2 from China came when both her and Terrell were hauled into the police station. China and Terrell gave consent to investigators to go into their home while they spoke to the officers. So while they're in the police station, officers are going through everything in their house. During her police interview, China said that she had arrived home at 9:30 or 10 that evening. So keep in mind, she just said earlier that she got home at 2. Now it's 9:30 or 10 the prior evening and had been sleeping in the living room with Paris on her chest. When Paris's crying woke her up around 2:30, she said she heated up a bottle in the microwave and fed Paris. After changing the baby's diaper, she laid down on the couch, put the baby back on her chest, and went to sleep. China claimed that when she woke up in the morning, Terrell was on the couch with her, and she did not know where Paris was, so she just assumed that Terrell had put Paris upstairs in the bassinet. Terrell told investigators that he got home between 3 and 4 in the morning and laid down on a small couch, but after trying to sleep for a bit, he said he got up and moved to the bigger couch where China was sleeping, and he claimed that when he woke up in the morning, he found Paris dead face down on the large couch in the corner. But for me, like both versions of their story don't make sense.
Yeah.
Where's the burning come into play?
Do you like cooking meth? Because, like, is that
No.
where
So
we're
he
going with
sells
this?
cocaine and weed. Drabbles
Surprising
or
that they
lace.
were like, go look at our house.
I thought that was weird too, but he's got another place that he refers to as the spot. I didn't really write about that because it has nothing to do with China's situation, but the spot is another apartment, and I think that's where he keeps all the drugs that he's selling.
Hmm. That's
I
nice
guess
of
that
him to
way,
keep his home and work life separate.
sure is. Let's pretend they're drabbles or laced with bits of truth. The
Drabbles?
baby, they're short fictional stories, also known as
Drabbles?
lies. Yes, new word for you. The baby was MIA. So let's pretend, okay? So this baby's MIA. And let's assume she was upstairs in her bassinet. Now, I don't find it far fetched that Terrell continued to sleep while China took care of the school age rugrats, but she didn't go check on the baby ever. She went and put the kids on the bus, fed everybody else breakfast, got everybody dressed, did whatever their morning routine was, and never checked on the baby. I find that hard to believe. But then, according to Terrell, he woke up and the baby was face down on the couch, already dead. So that doesn't make sense. And then China claims that Paris was alive but not acting right while she was getting the kids ready for school. So that doesn't make sense. And also, if Terrell woke up and the baby was face down and dead, why did he not call 911? They waited, put the kids on the bus, and then drove to the hospital. That does not make sense to me.
Well, she was already dead, so they were doing the whole what's the rush?
You call 911. You don't just say, well, let's go ahead and strap her in her car seat and drive to the hospital and pretend like this just
They
happened.
strapped her in the car seat?
I don't know. Probably not.
I was going to say, that seems weirder.
So prior to the search of the home, police knew that the baby had been burned, but no one knew what caused the burns. So during the search, the detectives they're looking for something that could have caused these burns. I feel bad for those investigators because I feel like there's lots of things that could or could not have done it. You know what I mean? All they know is this baby had a couple burns on her, but they weren't sure what caused them. So they're just going in there and looking for anything possible that could cause a burn on a baby. During the search, the detectives received even more confusing information from the coroner. The coroner said the baby's burns had been a type of thermal injury. The burns were clearly defined in a rectangular shape. Some areas were severely burned, others were spared completely. For example, Paris's entire back was not burned at all.
Did they
So
put
it's
her
like
on
something.
like a burner, a skillet?
So they would have had to put her face down, and no, they did not. So confused, the officers continued to look for something that could cause thermal burns in a rectangular shape.
The
They looked for
iron.
like a cookie tin, a heating pad, just anything that could cause a giant rectangular burn. The search turns up absolutely nothing. But from talking to the neighbors, police discovered that Terrell's sister, Leonda, babysat China and Terrell's children the night before Paris was brought into the ER, so the night that she died, or the wee hours, whatever, however you want to word it. Liana babysat from 7 p.m. to 10-ish, and then police learned that Terrell and China had been arguing earlier in the evening, and China had been seen sitting on the front porch around 4 a.m. How active is this neighborhood that people are seeing her at 4 o'clock in the morning? You know what I mean? Like, geez. I couldn't
Well, I
tell
think
you what
it's
my neighbors
weird
are.
because if she had any sort of burns the night before, I can't imagine she'd want to sleep. Like, I imagine
Yeah,
a super fussy baby.
right? When investigators ask why they were fighting, of course, Terrell and China lie a few times before finally confessing their argument was over the paternity of Paris. Terrell didn't believe that he was the father of the baby girl. China said the reason she was on the front porch at 4 a.m. was because Terrell left with Paris earlier in the evening and she was waiting for him to return with their baby girl. So investigators were like, so baby daddy could have inflicted the injuries to this baby? And China was all, I love Terrell. I want to protect him. And the police were like, did he bring you a burned baby when he returned? She didn't answer. Like, she just kept her mouth shut. So, as far as the truth, no one really knows anything yet. But according to some confusing and long-winded details, Terrell is allowed to leave. They were able to confirm his whereabouts. China's arrested for child endangerment because the only thing the coroner can determine at this point was that China was home alone with the baby at the time of death, claiming that Paris died between 1 a.m. and not significantly later than 3 a.m. So between 1 and 3 a.m., Paris died. They let Terrell go, arrest her for child endangerment. At this point, by the way, the coroner still did not know what killed this tiny little baby. I don't know how the coroner can determine the time of death without knowing what the cause of death was, especially if the core temperatures are used with the time of death, with determining
Mm-hmm.
time of death. Because if it's involving a burn, wouldn't you expect the temperature to be raised? So I was curious about all that, and that led me down a different rabbit hole, which it added like a whole lot of details to this. And then I went through and edited it all out. But the most important things that they look into for determining time of death are body temperature. We lose 1 to 2 degrees per hour until we've reached basically the room's temperature. And they start at the average body temperature of 98.7. But if you run hotter, and that's not documented, because you know how some people run hotter, that will also change your time of death. But they also check for rigor mortis, which is the stiffening of the muscles, and the lividity, which is the skin turning a bluish purple color after time of death or after death. And they factor all that in to figure out the time of death. So he figured it was between 1 and 3 a.m. China was released from jail a few days later due to a lack of evidence. I'm curious, once she was released, what happened with the other 3 kids that were in the household? Was she allowed home with the kids? She was just arrested for child endangerment, but
Maybe they went into like temporary foster.
well, and then it also makes me wonder because I know one of the kids she's not the mother of. There's a lot of kids involved in this.
I feel like that's probably, you know, how when they have emergency foster households,
Mm-hmm.
that situations like this one, or whoever, if there's a known parent of the other child, goes there. But I would imagine emergency fosters.
Well, they would have gotten him back mainly because the charges were dropped because they couldn't prove anything. A few months later, so early 2006, mind you, Paris was pronounced dead on August 30th, 2005. So early in 2006, the coroner was alerted to a case in Virginia where an infant had been found dead inside a microwave. Upon further investigation, the coroner discovered that the burns in both
Microwaved the
cases,
baby.
the burns in the two cases were very similar. So on May 18th, 2006, police returned to the now abandoned
Oh,
apartment.
when she said she microwaved the bottle, she microwaved the baby instead.
That's what I thought also, but this case gets even more twisted. So just hold on for the ride. This made my I thought this would be a simple, man, this woman's a piece of shit, but makes your brain spin, okay? At least mine. So they go out to the apartment, which nobody's living in now. It's been abandoned. And after doing their forensic thing on the microwave, they confirm that Paris's DNA is inside the microwave.
That's disgusting.
It's disgusting. And according to the coroner, Paris was placed on her back and was face up towards the heating element, and she was microwaved. On November 27th, 2006, China was arrested again for aggravated murder of her. Well, I guess it was the first time she was arrested for murder, but she was arrested for aggravated murder of her infant daughter with the specification that she had purposely caused the death of a child under the age of 13. Now, I'm going to do my best to not make this a 5-hour case, and I'm going to spare you some of the details. She's tried a total of 3 times for the murder of her daughter.
Why
3.
does it get thrown out?
So now I'm going to tell you the details on that. Briefly, the things that I found important, because I think I read all these court documents. I have all of them. It's a lot of information. It breaks it all down, and I can tell you there's people coming and going at all hours in this apartment. While awaiting her first trial, China becomes sexually involved with her cellmate, Linda Williams, who would later testify that China confessed her guilt to her. So Linda says during the trial that around March 27th, 2007, she and China had a conversation concerning the death of Paris Talley. China supposedly told Linda that she and Terrell fought over Paris's paternity, and Terrell denied that he was the father. And he said that he was going to move out. He didn't want to be with her because if that wasn't his baby, he wanted nothing to do with her. And then he got up, walked out. China sat back and drank a lot of Bacardi 151, and she was piss-ass drunk.
A lot.
And she too.
A lot.
So Terrell and her end up drinking together this bottle of Bacardi. They kill almost the entire bottle between the two of them. And it's also noted by Terrell's sister that China could barely walk. She was piss-ass drunk. And
that was really deserves the charge of whatever the neglect or endangerment or whatever, because why would you even do that with a month-old baby?
I have no idea. But she left the house too. After getting drunk, she left, which is what made me go, okay, so the sister at some point was babysitting, and there's so many people and so many different timelines that don't make sense. If Terrell's sister babysat all these kids until 10 o'clock when China returned, supposedly with Terrell, and they killed a bottle of Bacardi 151, well, he gets pissy and storms out. Then China leaves. Who's watching the kids? Because supposedly the sister left. But from what I read, I think maybe the sister was a neighbor. I'm not sure. But she also has children, and apparently quite a few of them. This is what she's supposedly telling her cellmate, that when she got home, she went to sleep, and when she got woken up, it was to Terrell screaming that Paris wasn't breathing. And that's when China ran downstairs to see what was going on. And the prosecutors asked Linda about any other conversations with China. And Linda replied, "Yeah, I asked her, did she do it? And she told me that first she said she didn't remember. And then on the second occasion, she told me then she put the baby in the microwave and started it and then left the house." Linda also testified that she and China talked about it again early the next morning before breakfast because Linda had questions. Okay, so Linda testified that China said that she put the baby in a microwave, and I asked her, I said, "How'd you get her in there?" Basically, it sounds like she was trying to tiptoe over how to ask that question. And according to Linda, China said, "She fit right in. I got really furious and upset, and I wanted to leave." She shoved the baby in the microwave and left out the door after she turned it on. And then Linda apparently asked China, "How did she fit in the microwave?" And China supposedly said she just fit right in. That was disgusting. And then when asked why she was testifying against her lover, she said she was there for the baby. The baby deserved justice. Oh yeah, by the way, Linda is also known as the jailhouse snitch because she likes to testify against people. Linda also
So
claimed
why
that
did that get thrown out the first time?
I'm getting there. And the prosecutor asked Linda whether or not China gave a reason for killing the baby. And Linda claimed China said that her kid's father said that if the baby wasn't his, he was going to leave her. And she was more concerned about the baby not being his than anything in the world. And that's what she was most concerned about. If the baby was gone, she wouldn't have to worry about the paternity issue.
If the baby didn't
Now,
exist, he has no reason to be there.
he loves her. They can just make another one and she'll just have to make sure it's actually his, is the way she was looking at it. But that first trial was declared a mistrial because the defense threw a surprise witness on the stand. That surprise witness was Terrell's 8-year-old son, who took the stand and said that a neighbor boy put Paris in the microwave and turned it on, and that he took Paris out after about 2 minutes, which was
God.
supposedly witnessed by 2 other people who were also children. You know as well as I do that the courts were just it was
Horrified?
probably it was probably very chaotic at that point in the courtroom because the prosecutors haven't gotten a chance to look into any of this, so it was declared a mistrial because they can't prove anything.
That, and even
China
if
ends up
that
being
happened, where the hell are the parents who are responsible for all the children?
I literally say that in like a couple sentences here because China was retried in August of 2008, so she's rearrested, recharged, goes to trial in August of 2008. Her defense presented testimony from the 8-year-old boy who claimed to have seen a neighbor boy, only referred to because he's a minor as DT, and that DT supposedly put the baby in the microwave and turned it on. And that's where my next thought process was. All of these children testifying is great, but where are all the adults? No one took the infant out or called 911. Why are kids being left alone with an infant? Who was supposed to be watching all of these children?
Well, at the very least, the month-old child.
Well, and if the coroner's time of death is correct, that's between 1 and 3 a.m. Why are kids up at 1 and 3 a.m.? I realize there's some parents out there that don't believe in bedtimes for their kids. I am not of that variety. I really enjoy when my kids go to bed because that is my me time. I can't have me time with
I still go back to, I feel like that baby was doing a lot of crying.
the prosecutors during the second trial. They stopped the defense from calling the 2 other witnesses who would have testified that the child DT told them that he put the baby in the microwave and turned it on, and they objected to the testifying to this 2 other people testifying on the grounds that it would have been hearsay since they didn't visually see it, but supposedly the 8-year-old son did. So that's why he was allowed to testify. So they blocked the other 2 people from testifying, but they also showed the jury Linda Williams' testimony from the first trial, the jailhouse, where she claimed that China had confessed her guilt. And they showed the video because even though they subpoenaed her, they couldn't find where she was at. The jury found China guilty of murder, but they were deadlocked on the sentencing. So the court sentenced China to life without the possibility of parole. Now, of course, in November of 2010, the courts reversed the conviction based on the prosecutor's misconduct for excluding the testimony of the witnesses. Now, I realize everybody deserves a fair trial. I don't understand, and I feel like at this point that the prosecutors really have it out as China is the guilty one here. Does that make sense? Because I don't understand why they don't see the possibility of it could have been a kid. Kids do stupid stuff all of the time. How do you have 3 children saying this is what happened and adults saying no, it's not? So them blocking those other 2 kids as witnesses, but then allowing, okay, so those other 2 witnesses are saying that DT told them that he put the baby in the microwave, right? And and prosecutors stopped him from testifying, or the other 2 from testifying. But then they play Linda's testimony. That's also, if you're going to go based off of their version of hearsay, Linda's saying that this is what China supposedly said, right? Like, it's no different than the kids testifying. So that's why they throw out the second trial. And that brings us to April and May of 2011. China is tried for a third time. And if you're not tracking, that's 6 years since this baby was killed.
She's been in jail this whole time, though, right?
I think she was out after the first one because it was a mistrial. But all the children testified for the defense on the third trial. China's defense also pointed out that Terrell could have been the killer. They also pointed out that he had a history of being a violent, jealous man. They also questioned all of the timelines and that people were coming and going and people have keys and there's a key that's missing and anyone could have come and gone, especially Terrell. They also said that China, part of China's defense, was that there were plenty of witnesses that said she was intoxicated to the point of not being able to walk straight and she was too intoxicated to have committed the crime. That was part of her defense, right?
So I don't know if you've ever had 151, but
I sure did.
A whole bottle of it. I'm wondering where all the vomit is because a whole bottle?
Right?
I don't even know how they were awake 12 hours later or falling asleep on the couch or any of that. So I can see where probably was not aware children were awake. However, I still think even if a child did it, she deserved to be charged with something because she decided to get blacked out drunk when she was supposed to be caring for an infant.
Yeah, I agree. So the state presented evidence from 2 women from the jail, again with Linda's original testimony, and another woman that during like a physical altercation in the prison, one of the inmates called China a baby killer, and China's response was, "I didn't mean to do it." So that's where, when I read that, I had the same thought process you did of, did she microwave the baby and not the bottle? I realize she's blackout drunk, but is that what she did? So when she said, "I didn't mean to do it," that was where my brain went. But then China's ex, Linda, testified for the defense. Now, mind you, they just used her original testimony for the prosecutors. And now she's testifying for the defense, claiming that she was bullied by police to lie and say that China confessed because the baby needed justice. But China never really did confess. And she also said she was on a lot of psych meds at the time. And she can't really remember much of that. 6 years ago. I don't remember. And also the defense said that China's supposed confession of "I didn't mean to kill my baby" was meant, it's being taken out of context and meaning as a mother, it was her job to protect the baby and she failed and now the baby's dead. So the clincher for me, in my opinion, was that Terrell testified that China said, "If you didn't cheat on me, your daughter would still be alive." The third jury hears all the different testimonies. I feel sorry for them because it sounds like it was a big shit show. And the final conclusion was that China and Terrell argued over Paris's paternity while drunk as skunks. During this fight, Terrell confessed to having sex with the neighbor lady because he was pissed off at her. And China's anger turned into a violent rage. And this is when China shoved her 28-day-old infant daughter into the microwave for 2 minutes. She then removed the baby and put her on the table. The doctor said the baby died after her core temperature reached 107 to 108 degrees, or for those that don't do Fahrenheit, about 42 degrees Celsius. She had no external burns, but did suffer high heat internal injuries. So they cooked her insides. She cooked, you know how they say when you microwave stuff, you got to stop the microwave and stir it because it cooks unevenly. That was why certain parts of her body were burned more than others, because it does heat unevenly. So China ends up receiving a life sentence without parole on May 20th, 2011. And by the way, I know you're curious, but it was confirmed that Terrell was in fact the father of Paris. It's a hell of a shit show of a case, right? Like,
Yeah.
that poor baby.
I
But
don't
I
even.
also, so I agree that China deserved some sort of punishment for getting blackout drunk, but I don't understand why they didn't investigate further into all these kids saying this person did this. This person also admitted to doing this, but the police prosecutors were like, no, we can show that he wasn't there between 1 and 3 a.m. And that's where I question, how
The
accurate
time of death.
is the time of death?
Since
Because if the time of death is inaccurate, then that means it opens up the pool of suspects as to who could have killed Paris. And China, again, I think Terrell should have been charged as well, because the two of them are supposed to be taking care of this baby. They both live there. They're supposed to be caring for these children. It's his child. Whether you want to say it's not your kid or not, it is your responsibility to prove otherwise and go from there. Because I was curious, is this like an 8-year-old boy testifying he saw somebody else because he's trying to protect his mom? But no, that is Terrell's 8-year-old son that he has with a different woman that testified. So that's not even China's son that was trying to defend her. Does that make sense?
yeah, it's not like
But
he was trying to save his mom.
right. I don't know. I question how guilty she actually is. Does that make sense?
No.
I think she's
Well, it makes sense
guilty.
because she's guilty any way you slice it. She's the reason that baby's dead. Her
Right.
actions did that. She might not have pressed the microwave button. However, this is such a severe case of neglect all the way around.
Yeah. But I think Terrell should have caught a charge as well, because he was there too, and he also got blackout drunk. And I'm curious where all the adults were to all these children that are running and coming and going as they please. And again, I question the time of death. I know we have a few followers that are medical examiners. If they could shoot us a message, I'd be curious, how accurate is the time of death when it involves thermal burns? But that's all I've got. Poor baby.
Poor baby is right. It's disgusting. And I thought you didn't like doing children cases. This could have been the worst one you've done.
I know. And I was curious
And
why
you didn't even do a fucking trigger, you sick son of a bitch.
you said you wanted to be surprised.
Yeah, but other people might not be appreciative of your little surprise there.
I did say it involved the death of a baby. Granted, it was right before I said that the baby died, but I don't know. I know she's guilty of neglect, but I'm still curious as to who pushed the buttons. And also, part of what makes me think that she didn't do it is, why would you keep the microwave for over a year? Wouldn't you?
She
I
didn't
would.
see a reason to get rid of it.
If I microwaved a baby and killed it and essentially got off scot-free because they couldn't figure anything out, I would not keep that shit. I would have gone out immediately and purchased a new microwave and set that shit on fire, since I seem to have a thing with burning stuff, and disposed of that real fucking quick. But it sat there. So as a grown-ass adult who chose to leave it, but also Terrell's story makes no sense at that point, because his all his versions say that whether he was home or not, that when he came home, that the baby was either on the couch or whatever. The baby was dead. By the time he got home,
Okay.
the baby would have been dead already.
So again, though, that 151, they were fucking drunk as skunks.
Yeah. It was a mess. Reading the details and stuff, I spared you. but it was a lot. But when China did say that the baby wasn't burned, her skin was just peeling, I literally, I couldn't have sat there and blinked any more than I did. I was just like, that doesn't even make sense. They don't shed their skin to grow. No, that's not how things work.
It's disgusting. How long did she get?
A life sentence without parole. Oh, but I was curious why it popped up as a case that I might be interested in. And it was because in 2014, they appealed her third trial, claiming that, now granted, she didn't get the death penalty, but she was up for it with all three of her trials because it was never ruled out that she couldn't be given the death sentence. But her attorneys claimed that because they put it back on the table, that it conflicted with the double jeopardy laws. And I was like, oh, double jeopardy is what triggered this popping up in my feed. Because I'm now
you
on
do
the
like
hunt.
those.
Yeah, well, I'm now starting to realize when I pick a case, I'm on the hunt to find what the connecting dots are that made it ping as something I might be interested in reading about. And this one, it was laced with stuff about double jeopardy, but none of it applies. She was not granted a fourth trial as of right now, in prison for life without parole.
Sounds like she's where she should be.
Yep. I just feel like there should be a couple more.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.